here in España.
Una cucaracha.
We'll see if I got chill.
Ah, j'ai took the test.
沖縄はどこですか？
沖縄どこですか？はい、違いますね。はい、次。
I think that it's important for you to know a language other than your own because it can help you connect with a person on a different level.
Fußball gefällt mir.
I want them to become world citizens, not just a citizen of their own community.
We all experience the same things. We all have the same basic wants and needs.
Что вы думаете, можно увидеть в Санкт-Петербурге?
You get to speak with people that you might not have been able to speak with before, learn a little bit more about their culture. It could change your life, learning more about how somebody else lives their life. So I think it's vital.
We will finish reading the Somnium in the next couple of weeks, and there will be an assessment and several different parts to it. There'll be, of course, a translation and language section, but there'll also be a section of reflection, where they'll have to reflect on what they've learned, how they can apply the philosophies of Cicero to themselves and to their beliefs.
Who is number 7?
It's a third singular subjunctive perfect active. And it's translated as there was.
I wanted them to be able to translate the idea of the Cicero and how it came into our hands. And there was an intermediate step between Cicero's pen and our publisher's printing press, and that was the medieval manuscript. So there was the language aspect, and then there was the making the connection.
The Latin 2s and 3s were working on Scipio, the dream of Scipio, and first they listened to the aria, and then they were doing their translation. And the Latin 4s, which I was in, we were translating the Aeneid. But a lot of times also we'll come together at the end of the period with something that we can all do as a group. And so this period, it was the manuscripts.
Okay, remember we talked about the reason we have this piece of Cicero is because it was preserved. It was deemed important by the monasteries in the early Christian world.
We talked for a minute about what it was about the Somnium that was important enough to save, and then we talked about the way in which it was saved through manuscripts, and that was with the PowerPoint presentation.
And the manuscript served as a status symbol. People had a manuscript, much like you have a Lexus or a Mercedes or a Ferrari or a Porsche. The nicer your manuscript collection was, the more status you had, okay? Remember, they only wanted to preserve and transmit the texts that served their purpose, which was? Christianity. Very good. Now, the different kinds of pigments that were used. Gold leaf, very important. Illuminated manuscripts had to have gold and silver because they had to actually illuminate the page. Now, you have your page. You have a scribe. You have an illuminator. Your illuminator is going to be the person who has the vision, sort of your production director, if you will. The scribe does sort of the grunt work. And when you get set under your task, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually rule out your page. Now, I have some manuscript examples, some different ideas for you. I also have some books that I'm going to put onto your different tables for you to look through for some ideas. You are going to be an illuminator or a scribe. You're going to find a partner. Together, you will have to plan your page. You will have to rule out your page, and on your page,
they had to choose 4 of the different conventions from their glossaries to put into their manuscript. So they had to really think about, well, what are we going to put into this? Where are we going to allot space? So there was a certain amount of problem solving. We have a blank page. How are we going to get from blank page to planned manuscript to finished product? Okay. And they had to choose portions of the text that they were able to understand so that they could appropriately illuminate their pages.
Optime, optime. Uge pai, let's begin. Incipiamos.
One that's probably like vivid so that you can draw stuff on it. See.
It had like a text underneath.
Do you have that one?
Yeah, can we have maybe the tree on the side?
Yeah, you can do that.
And that's at the top right, and it's what make these longer too.
Like make it as it coming into the river?
Yeah. What's a zoomorphic decoration?
Oh, that's going to be something with an animal.
Oh, well, we can do that.
Okay. Hold on. Decorated initial.
Oh, that's a good idea. You could do the aria. That'd be great.
Since we're gonna have pictures.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
This right here, because we'll have the big E and then we can put something in there. Oh, is that a B?
Yeah, it is a B.
All right, we can do that.
We can do the first, doing the one where it was Scipio and F.
He's saying he was showing indeed Carthage from some certain bright, lustrous place on high full of stars.
They're standing up in the heavens looking down on Carthage and seeing how small it is.
Yeah, it's the decorated initial.
We'll go about 4 or 5 lines, and then we have to find maybe like a world map.
Thank you. Consu, Gunter, C-O, long O. N-S. Thank you. Infimoke. I, long I. N, F. I, M.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to work for about another 5 minutes. Okay, but as I'm walking around, I'm seeing some really, really great stuff. In about 5 minutes, we're going to go into our final discussion and some discoveries that we've made while we've been working on the manuscript pages.
They're conversing, they're looking down on the earth, so probably they're just standing next to each other. Have Scipio the elder pointing down at the earth, and Scipio listening, and then Paulus is standing next to Scipio.
Gotcha.
E-S-S-O.
E-S-S-O, alright.
D-R-D.
New word?
D, yeah, new word. D.
We wanted it
D-I?
Yeah, D-R.
Okay.
Yes. And that's splendor.
The idea with the closure was to bring the whole thing together so that they could really see what it was that they had accomplished during the class period and really become aware of some of the connections between today and 1,000 years ago.
The most important thing I learned was that it definitely was a lot harder back then than it is now, and I guess in that way the text from back then should be much more valued, and it's amazing that it actually came through these time periods.
As I was walking around, I was listening to some of you, observing some of the techniques and the strategies that you were using to divide your work. Sarah and Angie, talk to us about the way you set about your scribe duties.
I was the scribe, and while I was writing, it helped when Sarah would read me what was on the page.
What do you think it would have been like if you had been a scribe in Europe in 1202? Do you think that you would have had somebody reading to you?
No.
Probably not. I want you to talk to me for a second about the ease with which you were able to write as compared to what it would have been like had Sarah not read to you.
I may not have understood the words that I was seeing or reading, and my eyes would have gotten tired.
Your eyes would have gotten tired, and you probably would have made some
mistakes.
Yeah.
It was very interesting when we were in the middle of our closure, and I asked them to think about the fact that this wouldn't have happened in a scriptorium in a monastery, and how would the task have been different had you not had this this accommodation made, and it makes them think, the things that we naturally do today, you couldn't do then. I think it also gives them greater appreciation for the modern way of doing things as opposed to the way it was done in order for us to have the things that we have today.
Could you read what you've got?
Hunc ut comites consequuntur Veneris alter Mercurii cursus in infimoque orbe luna radis solis accensa convertitur.
Very good. Imagine that you are a scribe who knows no Latin. You're going to have to imagine real hard that you don't know any Latin, okay? And you are illiterate and you're just copying the letters and copying the words and you have no idea what you're copying. Can you imagine what kind of mistake you might make in the first line? Like, for instance, a little word, ut. What might you mistake ut for?
It.
Or et, right?
That's, yeah, et.
Yes, et. Very good. And then that would change the entire passage, okay, by taking out the ut, the as, and putting and, okay? And later scholars would look at it and go, oh yes, Cicero has used an interesting word here, word choice, and he separated his hunc and comites, and, when in fact it was just a mistake, okay? So very good. So you all did a really good job delegating. Very nice. Okay,
We often run into problems in the Aeneid, I know from personal experience, where there are different translations, and doing the manuscripts today really helped us understand how these mistakes can happen.
So you haven't finished your illumination task yet, but you have a really great plan. So can you talk to us a little bit about your plan?
Well, we're taking our passage from the aria,
okay,
which was Stefan's idea, and then what we're going to have is our border. We're going to have the sun along with ears and musical notes, because the passage talks about how the eye is turning upon the sun, and it's gazing upon it, and it's all its splendor. And it talks about how you don't hear the noise of the world because we're so used to it. So we're going to symbolize that with the sun and the ear and the different notes. And then for the bottom down here, it's talking about the Nile. So we're going to have the Nile for its noise as well, and it's all centered around the music, so we're going to try to have an emphasis on musical notes and things of that nature.
I was really intrigued by this idea because something that we haven't talked about today is the role of music in the medieval manuscript. And you had a certain kind of book, a missal, that you would take with you to a mass, and it would have the different hymns and songs, and they would all be musically influenced and musically based. And so I think it's nice that we have at least one example of a musical page here. And the fact that it's not Latin but the Italian is okay, because we have to remember that manuscripts were not only, when the printing press came along in the 15th century, manuscript production did not completely stop. In fact, we have a manuscript tradition even today. Okay? So you all did a really great job. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You have to really create an environment where you're really hooking them and grabbing them and making the connections that they are going to find important enough to become invested in the study of whatever it is that they're studying. And when they are able to make the connections between something that happened 2,000 years ago and something that's happening to them today, then they become invested, and it makes the language learning process that much more valuable. Also, they find the journey that much more important.